Good morning, everyone. So good to see all of you who are in place here today, and so good to see, well, I can't see you who are streaming, but we're so glad that you are streaming with us today. It's just really good to look out and see your bright, shiny faces. Even if you have a mask on, it's so good to have you here. Thank you to the worship team for so beautifully introducing what this Sunday is all about. It is Pentecost Sunday, and that's what our message is going to be about this morning as well. So Roger, if you could show that first slide. The message today is titled, The Missional Church. And if you could show the picture, Roger. We all know the story of Acts 2, where Peter preached his first Pentecost sermon and 3,000 people were converted. This is very likely where it happened. These are the steps going up to the temple in Jerusalem, and it's very likely that at the top of these steps that you are seeing in the picture, Peter stood, and below him were these 3,000 people who heard his Pentecost message. So Acts 2, the Pentecost story, has been read for you by the worship team. I'm going to choose two other scriptures that go right along with it. And the first is from the Old Testament, Psalm 67. Listen to how this psalm says that God has blessed us in order that we might be a blessing to others. May God be gracious to us and bless us, and make his face shine upon us. Why? That your ways may be known on earth, your salvation among all nations. May the peoples praise you, O God. May all the peoples praise you. May the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you rule the peoples justly and guide the nations of the earth. May the peoples praise you, O God. May all the peoples praise you. Then the land will yield its harvest, and God our God will bless us. God will bless us. Why? So that all the ends of the earth will fear him. And the New Testament part that I'm going to read is from 1 Peter 2, verses 9 and 10. And Peter, remember, was the preacher of Pentecost. And this is what Peter wrote in his first letter years later. We're going to look at chapter 2, only two verses, verses 9 and 10. This is who we are, Peter says. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. We're going to open that up. Today is Pentecost Sunday, and this is when we emphasize that the church's mission to the world is a mission of changing lives through the gospel of Jesus Christ. So today's message is about doing church, why we are here in Bellevue as a church. There are three basic categories for doing church. Which of these three categories do you want our church to be in? The first category is the institutional church. And the institutional church is a church that exists to perpetuate itself just because it's right. The institutional church says there has to be a church like ours because we have the only right doctrine. There has to be a church like ours because we have the only right worship. We are the only church that does the Lord's Supper right, the way it's supposed to be done. I call this the church of the last detail. We have the last detail right, and so we have to exist. There has to be one of us in every city. The institutional church, its success is just to keep existing as the right one. That's it. We're the only ones with the right theology. So we have to keep existing. And a lot of our churches are institutional. The institutional church doesn't really have to help anybody. It's enough just to have the right doctrine or whatever. And so it just has to exist. The second category is the consumer or the market church, which says we exist to meet felt needs. We help people spiritually, socially, emotionally. This is not an institutional church. It's more people-oriented. And the focus is not on preserving the institution, but on marketing itself to people. It's consumer-oriented. And there are some good things to say about this orientation, but I do think that there is an even better category. I think there's a third option, a more biblical option than either one of the first two, and let me call this third, and I believe correct category, the missional church. And a missional church is not an institutional church existing to perpetuate itself. And it's not a church that exists to help people according to their agenda. The missional church says, what is Jesus Christ's mission to the world, and how can our church be an agent of fulfilling His mission? My sense is that if you have a choice, our church should not be an institutional church, nor do I think our church should be a consumer church. But a church should always be a missional church, where a church asks itself, okay, what is Jesus Christ's mission in the world, and how can we be a part of His mission? Jesus Christ stated His mission in several places. One place is Luke 19, verse 10, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Jesus saves people through His work on the cross. And the missional church brings the message of the cross. That's part of its mission. But Jesus' mission is fuller than that. It's also in Matthew 28, verse 19, that we make disciples. That lost people are not only saved from sin, but they become disciples, followers of Jesus, and they give up what they have of a self-centered life to be a disciple. But Jesus' mission goes even beyond seeking the lost and making disciples. In Luke 4, His mission is to touch the poor, to bring freedom to the oppressed, and to bring freedom to the prisoners, and to relieve the oppressed. And so my sense is that if you have a church, that a church should not be an institutional church, nor should it be a consumer church, but a church should be a missional church where it asks itself, what is Jesus' mission to the world, and how can Bellevue be a part of His mission of seeking lost people and then turning them into disciples and then teaching them to touch the poor and the prisoners and the oppressed? There's huge power when a church makes that choice, because then a church knows why it's here. And then everything that goes on in the church centers around being part of Jesus' mission. Everything centers around it. To seeking lost people, to forming them into disciples, and then through those disciples to touch the poor and the prisoners and the oppressed. Those are justice issues. But you see, that's right where we get hung up. Some want the church to be institutional. Just keep existing for itself. Is that Jesus' mission? I think not. And some want the church to be consumer-oriented. But the best category is the choice to be missional, where we align ourselves with His mission of seeking, discipling, and redeeming people, bringing His kingdom to bear on every part of life. That is the Church of Pentecost. I believe this is exactly what God calls our church to be. Not an institutional church, and not even a consumer or a market church, but a missional church, where every single thing we do in our church dovetails with Christ's mission of redemption for a fallen world. We are here to do the mission. It's the whole reason we're here, of touching lost and hurting people with the grace of God. In 1 Peter 2, 9 and 10, God calls our church to be the missional church of bringing Christ's hope to people. Let's open up these two verses in two main steps. First, who we are, and second, why we are who we are. First, who we are. Who we are as Christians. 5 things that we are as Christians. And I'll go right down the verse. Letter A. You are a chosen people. A chosen people. You're not a Christian primarily because you chose God, but because He chose you. It really is more about Him than about you or me. So God gets all the glory in it. Your being a Christian doesn't exalt you or I. It exalts God and the grace of God. God gets all the glory. We won't be walking around heaven with our thumbs under our suspenders out bragging one another. Instead, we'll be absolutely amazed that we are privileged to be there. John 15:16, Jesus says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you." We didn't hunt Him down. He hunted us down. He's the hound of heaven. We didn't work half our lives to find Him. He gave His life to find us. Being chosen by God says a lot more about Him than it does about us. He is the good shepherd who searches for the sheep. Letter B, you are a royal priesthood. Letter A, you are a chosen people. Letter B, you are a royal priesthood. If you are a Christian, you are a priest. It's true that we're not all preachers and pastors and evangelists and teachers, but we are all priests. What did a priest do in the Bible? A priest offered up prayer for people. They interceded in prayer for God on behalf of others. They brought sacrifices. All of this applies to every Christian regardless of age or sex or social standing. We pray and live sacrificially, all of us, as a priest. Letter C, you are a holy nation. Holy here means set apart for a special purpose. That's one of the Bible's meanings for holy, set apart for a purpose. That purpose is to be an ambassador of Jesus to wherever God sends you. Letter D, God's own possession. The verse says a people belonging to God. That's God's own possession in other translations. Think of your value to God. You are God's possession. The price paid for you was unimaginably high, the blood of Christ, and now we belong to Him. We've been bought with a price. What incredible worth God stamps every one of you with. What dignity every one of you possesses. God's own possession. But there's one more thing we are, letter E. We are a people who have received mercy. Now think of Peter who wrote verse 10. He denied Jesus. He wept bitter tears when all of that weight of his denials just crushed his spirit. But Jesus refused to leave Peter wallowing in guilt and shame. He doesn't do that with us either. Jesus found this broken man and He forgave him and He welcomed him back. What mercy! Jesus shows us the same mercy that He showed Peter. Charles Wesley beautifully captures mercy in the second stanza of that magnificent hymn, And Can It Be? He left His Father's throne above, so free, so infinite His grace, emptied Himself of all but love, and bled for Adam's helpless race. 'Tis mercy all immense and free, for, oh my God, it found out me. These 5 things we are as Christians, as a church, a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own possession, a people who have received mercy. Page 2. For those of you my age, sounds like Paul Harvey, doesn't it? For those of you who are younger, forget it. It's an old thing for guys like me. But page 2 is this. Why? Why are we these 5 things? Are we these 5 things to enjoy being in our own little corner? No. Then why? Last half of verse 9. So that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. The point is, you and I are the church. These 5 things. Why are we the church? To align ourselves with God's mission in the world. So that you may declare to others is the implication, the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his light. I am chosen. I'm a priest. I'm a holy nation. I'm God's own possession. I've received mercy. Why? To hold out to others the hope that Christ has given me. Peter, you see, is not writing about an institutional church. And I don't believe that he is writing about a consumer church. I don't believe that either. But I do believe he is writing about a missional church. Jesus chose you and I for his mission. Jesus made us priests for his mission. Jesus made us holy to be part of his mission. Jesus possesses us for his mission. Jesus gave us mercy that we could be part of his mission. Always, always he saves us for a purpose. Always he blesses us, not so that I go into a corner and just enjoy his blessing. But he does that so I may in turn bless others. Now let's think about something. These 5 things we are blessings, aren't they? Good things. Blessings. All right. So listen to Psalm 67, which says why we are blessed. Psalm 67, may God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face shine upon us. Doesn't stop there. Why may God bless us? That your ways may be known on earth, your salvation among all nations. That's how Psalm 67 starts. Here's how it ends. God, our God, will bless us. God will bless us so that all the ends of the earth will reverence him. Psalm 67 and 1 Peter 2, verses 9 and 10, and Pentecost are identical triplets. Blessed to be a blessing to others. Made into 5 beautiful entities so I can declare God's praise to others. Empowered by the Pentecost Holy Spirit so I can fulfill Jesus' mission to others. The mission of Bellevue Church and the mission of my life is to hold out to others the hope of Christ that God has blessed my life with. That's why our church is here. What are you and I willing to lay down for others that they might pick up life and truth and hope in Jesus? Jesus made himself uncomfortable for the sake of others. Jesus broke the social rules of the day. He ate with untouchables, touched the lepers. He welcomed the poor and generally crossed every social boundary of his day. He made himself uncomfortable for the sake of his mission of laying down his life for others. Henry Hudson tells a story that captures the point of all that I'm trying to say today. He tells a story about when he was in seminary and he was learning how to preside at the Lord's Supper. There's one point in the liturgy where the priest is supposed to spread his arms in a gesture that conveys both openness and crucifixion, like this. And Henry Hudson remembers asking the professor, exactly how wide should we open our arms? The professor replied, always open your arms until they are just beyond your comfort zone. And that will be about right. In opening my arms to others just a bit wider than my comfort zone, I express my life's mission. So in my neighborhood, in my workplace, where can I spread my arms just beyond my comfort zone and touch someone else's life? Someone who needs Jesus. Where can I spread my arms just beyond my comfort zone to, in the words of Psalm 67, be a blessing to someone else? Pentecost means that we are a missional church, not an institutional church existing for itself. Not that. And I don't believe that we're even here to be a consumer church, because I think there's a better category than that. I think that we are here to be a missional church, a light to those who need the touch of Jesus. Jesus said to the church, "You are the light of the world," which causes me to be all the more restless with myself and restless with Christians who do nothing but shine the light on themselves and on one another. There are lighthouse parties where the light is just shined on all the truth. Put the light out into the darkness. That's where the light is needed. Let me get out of my little all-Christian world, and let me get out to where the darkness is. C.T. Studd said it well in a little poem. Some people live within the sound of church or chapel bell. I'd rather run a rescue shop within a yard of hell. Your environment is dark? Praise God. Stay there. Don't run from it. You're the only one in your company who knows Jesus? Stay there and shine. You are the light God put there. Dale Cooper, the former chaplain of Calvin College, I know it's now university, but when he was chaplain, it was Calvin College. He once put this in a very challenging quote. He said, "It's continual association with only Christians at coffee and concerts and so on, a refusal to be salt and light." James Boyce writes of the self-protecting churches whose priority is their church thing while the world stumbles in darkness. Let's make this a doable challenge. Think of just 3 people. Just 3 people you know who need the hope of Jesus. Just 3, no more. Just 3. Start by praying for them. Just those 3. And see what God might do with that. When I worked as a hospice chaplain, one member of my team was Kate, our bereavement counselor. Her place on the team was to come alongside grieving families after the death had occurred. The rest of the team, the physician, the nurse, the social worker, the chaplain, and the aide, we were there during the dying process. But Kate came there after the death had occurred. She sent out an email to all of us one Monday morning. Quote, "The point of my getting out of bed each morning of my life is to make life less difficult for someone else." The point of my getting out of bed each morning of my life is to make the life of somebody else less difficult. Every person you and I meet every day is fighting an inner battle of some kind. Every person. Many are trying just to emotionally survive. My job every single day as a Christian, my purpose in getting out of bed every single morning is to make life less difficult for someone else. I have that mission from Jesus until the day He takes me home to heaven, whether I'm retired or not. We are blessed to be a blessing all the time, every day. We are part of God's mission every day that He allows us to live. And Bellevue Church is a part of God's mission every year that we remain here. Would you pray with me, please?